Hello and welcome to the studio. I'm Kami Nzeram, and this is Building Digital Experiences Around Data. So crucial to every business, big and small. Data controls so much. And I want to start with a kind of big thought, if you like, around the potential of data with my first guest here, Leon. Your business is software development. You help businesses leverage their data. Give us an overview. What are people asking for and what are you helping them do?
Well, thank you. So I think the topic of the conversation here is about, how do you create something out of data that is beyond your kind of baseline analytics or baseline level of kind of, querying the data and understanding it and looking through it. And I think there's a lot of kind of hygienic factors that need to be put in place. And I think a lot of companies are on that journey, but I think there's a huge opportunity to start extract value out of these data assets in a way that change how we interact with work, how we interact with each other, how we make decisions, how we run processes. And I think this is kind of the next kind of area that companies would want to move into, would want to explore, would want to understand where the value is. And, as you set me up, we help companies do that.
Georgina, from a finance perspective, what does that mean?
For me, at the moment with data, it's much more about educating the business. I think, in many organizations, data has evolved and it's scattered everywhere. So we're at the point now where we have to educate and bring that understanding to the business that we've got to pull it all together and see it as a real asset. Mm-hmm. And how we can, as Leon said, start to make really good decisions using the data that we have. But we've got a big journey that we have to go on before we can get to that point.
And when we talk about then leveraging that data, what's the journey then? Where do you want to take it?
I think in terms of making sure that when decisions are being made, that the time is taken to access that data, format it and provide it in the right way. You know what it's like when you get into a conversation and it's all emotional. How cool is it when you can come in and you can be the person in the room that actually shows the evidence for making the decision, and that's really where you get the big value is where you can demonstrate that evidence.
So I want to bring Bastian in. We're going to move from financial services, from your industry, to fashion, and we're talking about how you leverage data. And I want to hear from you, Bastian. How does this show up for you in the fashion world?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I see it from two sides, right? So in my area that I lead, I'm responsible for what we call tracking, and what we try here is to centralize all of the event tracking that goes from the site, from all the different apps, into some central data store that we then make available to analytics, to product, to machine learning teams, and so on. This is a challenge in itself because we have, of course, some privacy issues. We also see ourselves as being the role model for not storing all the data from the customer side. So being not evil, right? And this, of course, is a counterforce to what we actually also want to do, which is leveraging data. This challenge, let's say, is what keeps me awake at night at the moment, quite a lot. On the other side, right, on the product side, I can give you two examples for what we do with data. One is that traditionally the structure of a page, of a fashion page, but I think this is true for every web product as well, is that everything was statically curated, right? So you have men's clothes and women's clothes, is one example. Then we went to the next stage, which is about sports and, let's say luxury goods or something. But still, this is statically curated. And what we try now is going more about, or trying to structure the page more around events, right? Like wedding or like a trip, like travel, like whatever, right? And this is of course then not really easy to statically curate, but you need data for that. So you need to have some signals where you think, okay, this is something that you test, and based on the experiment, on the test that you drive, you get data, and with that you can grow in a category from the data itself. Another example is what we call outfits. So we have quite a lot of creators, influencers on our page that actually show their styles, their outfits, and then you can buy those in a package, let's say, right? But what we also want to try is to, based on what people buy, to come up with our own outfits that are just based on data, not on any individual that builds these. Yeah, and all of this is just two examples about how we use data, while at the same time we try to be better and be a role model of not using all the data that customers leave on the site.
And Bastian, it's a really fascinating glimpse into the dynamism, if you like, of your business and your industry. And moving to a very different industry, but I'm sure there will still be parallels, and that is debt advice. Lorna, Alan, what does data mean to you, and how do you use it?
So, as the largest UK not-for-profit debt advice organisation, we have over 6 million individuals like you and I that come to our website every year for some aspect of advice and help. We've been operating for 30 years, and we operate with all of the big banks. We have relationships with every major high street bank, anybody who provides credit in the UK. That means that we are absolutely data-led. Our drive is social purpose. We need to understand the aspect of society that helps us provide the best advice and help for an individual struggling with debt, so struggling to make ends meet. But we go further than that. We need to build insight, because we also go back to the government, we go back to a lot of the government organisations to lobby and influence policy changes, to fundamentally try and help much earlier on in somebody's debt journey to prevent that from happening. Any of us, and this is particularly important on the back of the pandemic and the energy crisis we're now seeing, that changing society behaviour, that changing economic climate for us is going to push more and more people into a problem debt who were never, ever expected to be in that situation. It's the likes of us that are actually going to face that now. And we're not good at budgeting. So we use our data not only to provide advice for an individual on their personal circumstances, but also to really try and learn and forecast and model and look at what we think is going to happen. The rules of society are changing. So to our use of data and that 30-year history of that anonymized data for us is really important. And that's driving us to need to think about more machine learning and more AI to really glean that insight, to provide that to lots of other players in the UK market.
Lorna, that's so fascinating to see how you have to face both ways, both in terms of customer journey and your role as an organization in the kind of public policy space. Really, really interesting. Paul Williams, another industry that is experiencing change. How does your use of data, how do you leverage it, and how do you manage our changing needs for efficient and sustainable water supply?
That's a good question. I suppose a little bit like Lorna, there's two sides. There's effectively trying to manage the customer experience and the customer journey far better, providing more information back to customers so they can understand their water usage, they can understand any decision points they can make. So examples of this would be smart water meters, for instance. If you, like a lot of other aspects of our lives, whether it's car charging points or smart meters on other utilities, you start being able to make more decisions as a user, as an interactor with that service, because there's more fine-grained control in terms of what you can do and how you can interact. And that would help obviously shape decisions that you make in terms of understanding how you're actually engaging with the service, or in our case with the utility and your water usage and your consumption, and how that how you can impact on that. And then from the other side, there's obviously an awful lot of water meters in the UK particularly, and in other countries as well. And then so trying to understand collectively all the data across all those meters. So as an organisation, Everflow provides water services to non-household customers itself, but we also provide our software and our services to competitors as well. So we also have that need to be able to segment what one part of the business is doing from what we're doing for other customers. So it's a little bit like Bastian was talking about in terms of making sure that there's no bleed across the organization in terms of the data you're collecting, and then you're using for improving platforms, for instance, for insight is anonymized enough so that there's no conflict of interests there. But the other part, particularly around, say, water meters, is trying to work out collectively if we can use some of the data we have, maybe from the source of water meters or from other indicators in terms of usage, where there might be water leaks, where there might be overuses of water, where we can start providing value-added services back to customers, potentially where they might not be able to see this themselves. So what we're trying to do is to use both domain knowledge and the data we have to reduce water consumption, and therefore the footprint on the environment that we have as an organisation. And that's quite critical. And then the final part really is most organisations have grown up really using effectively what are you as an organisation, right? You're a series of business logic, rules that you do in terms of processes that you do for customers. And in a sense, data is kind of an outcome of that. It's a consequence of doing something. And what we're trying to do is to flip that and actually create a system where data sits at the heart. So it's both the input and the output of the system, and the business logic acts on that. So Bastian talked about pulling all this data from all these different systems together, and there's a huge amount of complexity in how you align that, how you normalize that, how you a lot of refinement that goes on. And we're trying to look at ways in which we can actually make sure that the data we have is in the right format for what comes next, if you like, and the business logic is an add-on to that, an ancillary rather than the other way around. Probably far more complex to talk about than in 5 minutes on a chat now, but it's a really interesting challenge for us.
And Leon, excuse me, Leon, listening to that huge range of, as Paul said, very kind of complex uses or ways of commercializing data, you must have some fascinating projects come before you, and organizations come and say, look, we've got this thing, can you help us? What really excites you?
What really excites me is solving customer problems. So, all of the things that we just discussed are about how do you improve your customer lives in different ways by utilizing data. And that's what's exciting to us. And I think what we've seen here across these, these kind of different industries, there's a lot of similarities. Our organizations go through the process of kind of preparing their data for greater use, kind of extracting, transforming, loading it into a kind of a capacitor or a lake that then, it can be used, anonymizing it, solving all the data issues, but then starting to think about how can they improve their customer lives, and kind of how can you create experiences. And for example, we see that in our clients' industries, across lending, across insurance, across satellite communication. So satellite communication is a good example of the amount of data that a business at this scale and complexity and level of services produces.
It must be colossal. I mean, how do you chart a path through that avalanche of information?
Well, I think you shouldn't try and chart a path through the avalanche of information. You should prepare the information to be experimented with and to be played with and to be used for customer benefit. So the first job is kind of preparing that data to be in a state that it can be used by different parts of an organization. And then the next step is starting to think about customer problems and starting to think. It kind of breaks down into three big categories, right? You have cost reduction, you have improvement of processes, and you have products and services innovation or improvement. So kind of within these categories, how can you use the data to really change the customer benefit?
I'm conscious of time, so I want to go round and get some pointed reflections, and I'm going to start with you, Georgina. Greatest challenges. What's really tough?
I think, it hasn't been mentioned yet, but I'd really like to talk about the ethics of data. And I think the biggest challenge that we all have as business leaders is we've got this wealth of information. How can we use it, and how should we use it? I think that's something that we all want to do personalization. We all want to drive spend or revenue through getting our customers to spend. But I think we have to reflect back on what is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure there's enough time spent thinking about that.
And indeed, some of our panelists have discussed that and the walls within a business that you have to erect to make sure that you're not using data incorrectly or unethically.
Unethically, yeah.
Bastian, what is the greatest challenge you face? And you did talk about that yourself, about that balancing business need with respecting customer privacy.
I think, yes, that's definitely one, and probably the biggest at the moment. Another one is also what I see when I look back the last 10, 15 years in different companies is always company structure, right? So company structure is always this biggest question, right? Do you organize around business problems, or organize around systems, or organize around whatever, right? There's no optimal solution for that. But when it comes to data, I think this problem becomes even bigger, because then you talk about data ownership, you talk about the access to different systems. You have, for example, on the product analytics side, you have maybe 15, 20, 30 different teams like we have at Zalando, and all of them want to have their dashboards. And of course, they need to have a very strong foundation for how to leverage this data. But then it easily becomes kind of a mess, let's say, if the organization structure doesn't support this, right? And what you see as symptoms is usually that people complain about data quality, that people complain about ownership, and all of these things. And I think looking into organizing, or let's say using data and the data flows also as an aspect to build your organizational structure is quite important.
And Lorna, I suspect not only do you have a keen sense of the challenges within your organization, but a broader social point around data and fairness, especially with regards to, obviously, how it can impact personal finance.
Absolutely. So our biggest challenge really is not that we have a wealth of data. It's about, and Georgina's got a great point, it's how we're using that for the right social good, and how we are presenting that in a personalized way that somebody can leverage value from that. How we make it accessible, how we can use it to help others inform decisions they're taking, whether it's a government, whether it's a bank, whether it's our individual customers or clients, to help them better understand their situation. The equal challenge to that is, as individuals, we are getting far more acutely aware about what organizations are storing about us. And that privacy and that need to know why somebody is wanting that data and what they're going to do with it is becoming much more of a critical driver as to how we make it accessible, how we manage it, sort it, protect it.
And Paul, the last words with you, sir.
I think there's an interesting quote, actually, I read recently from Jennifer Sundberg, who's co-chief executive of Board Intelligence. And she says, and I would tend to agree with her, that being smart with data starts with asking the right questions. I think there's an awful lot of data, and as we've talked about, increasingly so. And one of the issues around that is, like anything, the more grains of sand there are on the beach, the harder it is to find the things you want. So I think that becomes a challenge in and of itself. Asking the right questions would lead us actually to look at possibly not necessarily storing more data, but storing the right data and focusing on the right quality of the right data as well. So I think that's important.
And on that note, keep asking questions, because some questions are deeper than others, but any question is better than no question, right? You've been watching The Studio. I'm Kami and Zeram. Thank you so much to our terrific panel, and you have been watching Building Digital Experiences Around Your Data.